Pamela's jab at Easter dinner would prove the most expensive joke of her career, ricocheting back in a courtroom 3 months later.
Real PhDs don't work from home in pajamas?
7 years of this. 7 years of proof she can't outgrow the need to belittle.
Why does she always have to choose Easter dinner as her battleground?
14 relatives paused over glazed ham and scalloped potatoes, a handful catching the poison beneath the joke.
How is the consulting business, Catherine? Still operating out of your guest room?
Catherine laughed softly. Not a nervous laugh, not a defeated one. Just the sound of a woman who had already stopped caring.
Pamela, the pie was exceptional. Did you use the new recipe?
I'm making conversation, George. Relax.
Pamela didn't realize that mockery would soon cost her everything she valued. The joke had a shelf life of exactly 3 months. After the dishes were cleared and the relatives had gone home, Catherine returned to her real world, a quiet office lined with books and a Princeton diploma on the wall.
They see pajamas. They don't see the hours of regression analysis that buy those pajamas.
For 7 years, Pamela had called her degree made-up internet credentials. Catherine never corrected her, not out of fear, but because correction required caring about an opinion that carried no weight.
Behavioral anchoring is the key. Once a jury accepts the baseline, the defense has nowhere to go.
Her personal silence had been traded for professional authority, an authority that major law firms paid handsomely to borrow.
Let her laugh. The data doesn't care about her opinion.
The behavioral mechanisms she studied, anchoring, overconfidence, loss aversion, were the same forces that would one day trap Pamela in a public defeat. A recent invoice showed a consulting fee north of $50,000 for a single case, more than Pamela's annual partner draw from her mid-tier firm.
Someday, she'll learn that my fake degree is worth more than her entire firm. But it won't be because I told her.
That proof was coming without her lifting a finger. 3 months remained until Easter's joke met its judicial execution. That patience hadn't come without cost. A year earlier, at a summer barbecue, the same dynamic had played out under a different sun.
Still consulting? Must be nice to never have a real job.
Pamela, that's enough.
Oh, relax. I'm just making conversation.
And I'm letting you make enough rope to hang yourself.
Catherine had decided years ago, silence let Pamela hang herself with her own rope. Correction only tightened the knot.
I should say more, but if I do, she'll just turn on me next.
George's alliance was always private, a whispered apology in the kitchen, never a defense at the table. A framed photo on Catherine's desk showed them at 10 and 8 before Pamela, before the mockery, when they were just brother and sister. He would thank her later quietly at Thanksgiving, but by then the damage had already been done and undone in a courtroom. 3 months after Easter, the dominoes began to fall. In a high-rise conference room, Pamela's firm accepted its largest retainer ever.
Dunmore Capital is a $40 million fraud case. We bury their claims. We etch our name into the skyline.
Meanwhile, across the city, Catherine's phone buzzed.
I've reviewed the preliminary data. The behavioral anchoring is textbook. I'll serve as your expert.
The caller was Alex Harris, lead plaintiff's attorney. Inside the case file he sent, Catherine's own research on confirmation bias was already cited. Neither woman knew the other was already in the fight.
We'll dismantle their experts. Show the jury that their numbers are just opinions.
Opposing counsel always tries to challenge my credentials. It never holds up.
The expert witness contract arrived within the hour, its fee dwarfing what Pamela's firm would bill for a month. Catherine signed without hesitation. 3 months remained until the witness list would be served, and Pamela would learn the cost of her joke. The witness list arrived on a Tuesday morning, landing on Pamela's desk with the weight of a subpoena.
You have got to be kidding me. The fake PhD, the woman I've mocked for 7 years now, she's here to destroy my case.
At the top of the list, under plaintiff's experts, Dr. Catherine Vance, PhD Behavioral Economics, Princeton University.
This witness has a personal vendetta. I'll file a motion to disqualify on conflict of interest.
Her partners exchanged glances. This was their lead litigator, panicking over a routine opposition witness list.
They don't understand. This isn't just a case anymore. It's personal.
The motion would cite family ties, but its true fuel was fear that Catherine's expertise would expose every weakness in the defense. Pamela slammed the draft onto her desk, its pages still warm from the printer. She had no idea that Catherine was already 10 steps ahead, preparing to dismantle her argument with the precision of a surgeon. Within 48 hours, Pamela's emergency motion landed on the docket, alleging Catherine had a long-standing personal animus that would bias her testimony.
If the judge sees through this, I'm finished. But I can't let Catherine testify against my own case.
Alex Harris fired back with a response listing Catherine's 11 federal testimonies, her Princeton credentials, and her peer-reviewed publications.
Dr. Vance has testified in 11 federal cases without a single disqualification. Her credentials are beyond reproach.
I expected this, Alex. She's predictable. When cornered, she attacks the person, not the argument.
The judge, noting the complexity of the expert testimony rules, set an expedited hearing for 3 days hence. A notice-stamped motion set for hearing was filed in the docket that afternoon. Catherine spent those 3 days refining her direct examination outline, undisturbed by the legal theater.
Let her argue personal conflict. The data will speak for itself.
The hearing would be Pamela's first public defeat in a case she had already lost. The courtroom doors closed. Judge Morrison took the bench, her gaze settling on Pamela like a spotlight.
Your Honor, this witness is my sister-in-law. A clear conflict of interest that could taint the entire proceeding.
Dr. Vance's methodology is public, peer-reviewed, and independent. Her family connection is irrelevant to the science.
The court finds the alleged conflict speculative. The need for expert testimony outweighs any personal friction. Motion denied.
The gavel struck the block. Pamela's face drained of color as she clutched her notes, knuckles white.
Not a word, just a nod. So slight only the judge could see it.
Pamela's phone buzzed with a dozen messages from the partners, but she didn't look at them. The courtroom had just become the place where 7 years of mockery would be weighed and found wanting.
She's going to destroy me on the stand, and there's nothing I can do to stop it.
The trial was set to begin in 2 weeks. For Catherine, it was just another deposition. For Pamela, it was the beginning of the end. In her home office late at night, Catherine highlighted key passages, a stack of behavioral economics texts beside her.
Confirmation bias doesn't just affect jurors, it blinds opposing counsel who underestimate it.
Her planner lay open to the trial week. The dates circled in red, a quiet countdown. Across town, Pamela's desk was covered in shredded drafts, a wastebasket overflowing with panic. She ripped another page from her cross-examination outline, then another, her hands trembling. She had turned Pamela's contempt into a quiet, ferocious preparation.
Every smirk, every sneer, I've stored like data points. Now they'll be the foundation of her defeat.
While Catherine built her case on data, Pamela's preparation was fueled by fear, not facts.
The jury won't need to know about Easter. The science will be enough.
2 weeks. Then the witness stand would become the scale on which her jokes were measured. The trial opened under a ceiling of marble and authority. Opening statements were swift. Both sides knew the case would pivot on expert testimony.
The plaintiff calls Dr. Catherine Vance.
Catherine rose, her charcoal blazer uncreased, and walked to the stand without a single glance at the defense table. She placed her hand on the Bible, her voice clear and unhurried, as if she had done this 100 times before. When she finished the oath, she lifted her eyes. Across the courtroom, Pamela was staring. In that look, 7 years of sneers were silently answered. Pamela's jaw tightened. She tried to hold the gaze, but something inside her buckled. The direct examination began. Alex Harris led Catherine through her credentials with a documentary precision. Her degrees, Her testimonies, her publications were read into the record like an unassailable inventory of truth. Pamela's pen tore through the legal pad. The woman she had mocked for 7 years was eroding her defense, credential by credential. Alex Harris projected a series of internal memos onto the screen. Catherine stepped to the chart with a laser pointer, her voice steady.
The defendant's internal memos show a pattern consistent with what we call optimism bias applied to risk disclosure.
A juror leaned forward, nodding. The jargon wasn't alienating, it was clarifying, each term a weight placed on the scale of justice.
They overvalued positive outcomes by an average of 23%, while downplaying the probability of regulatory action.
Every answer was a citation. Every citation was a nail in the defense's argument. The projection screen glowed blue behind her glasses. She traced a behavioral curve with the pointer, her voice never rising.
This is not fraud by overt lying. It is fraud by systematic cognitive misrepresentation, and the data bears it out.
The jury was completely still. Nothing in the room moved except Pamela's pen, which snapped in her grip. Catherine glanced at her notes, then back at the jury, as if she had just explained the weather. Pamela's cross notes were a mess of scratch marks and question marks. The direct examination had left her nothing to hold. Pamela rose for cross-examination, adjusting her suit jacket with a sharp tug. Her voice was tight as she approached the stand.
You expect this jury to believe you have no personal bias against my firm?
I expect them to review the data, counselor. That is the only bias that matters.
The courtroom stayed silent. A few jurors exchanged glances, unswayed by the theatrical question.
Isn't it true that you've had a personal grudge against me for years?
Any personal history is irrelevant to the statistical analysis of corporate risk disclosure.
Pamela's next question trembled. She glanced at the jury, searching for sympathy and finding none. She was unraveling in front of the very audience she needed to convince. Catherine folded her hands on the rail. Her expression remained open, professional, almost gently instructive. The cross-examination designed to destroy Catherine was instead destroying Pamela's composure. Desperation finally overrode caution. In a reckless gamble, Pamela snatched a printed study from her table and thrust it toward the witness stand.
So you concede that the Healy-Fong paper disproves your anchoring model?
Actually, on page 14, it validates the exact mechanism I've described. Shall I read the passage?
She opened the folder beside her, her finger already resting on the precise paragraph. The courtroom fell into a deep silence. Jurors who had been restless now leaned forward, exchanging quick, meaningful glances.
Objection.
Move on, Ms. Vance.
The objection was hollow, not a legal maneuver but a gasp of panic. The jury saw the sweating lawyer and the calm professor.
I can't.
Pamela's hand trembled as she set the paper down. Behind her, the defense table had become a wreckage of credibility. Her partners avoided her eyes, and the jury looked as if they had already reached a verdict. Alex Harris rose for a brief redirect, his tone almost gentle after the onslaught.
The Healy-Fong paper has been mischaracterized. It supports the anchoring model as I've applied it.
The clarification needed no elaboration. The jury had already absorbed the lesson. Closing arguments began under a fading afternoon light. The courtroom felt exhausted.
You heard Dr. Vance? The science is clear. The fraud is clear.
He gestured toward the witness stand, though Catherine now sat in the gallery, her leather portfolio closed, her gaze steady.
The plaintiff asks you to trust a personal conflict over facts.
The words limped out, carrying none of the force she had intended. When the judge dismissed the jury for deliberation, Pamela collapsed into her chair as if the strings had been cut. She sat alone as the courtroom emptied, the silence pressing in. Victory or defeat no longer mattered. She had already lost the one thing she valued most, the respect of the room. The jury returned in under 2 hours. The courtroom rustled with tension as the foreperson rose. The bailiff handed a slip of paper to the judge. We find for the plaintiff, compensatory damages of $35 million. Pamela gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles bone white, her eyes fixed on nothing. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Her co-counsel closed his notebook and did not meet her eyes. Catherine quietly placed her notes into her leather portfolio. No smile crossed her face.
She never even glanced at me. Not once.
The jury had believed the woman with the fake PhD's 7 years of mockery, answered in a single verdict. The judge dismissed the jury. Reporters spilled into the hallway, already tasting the story. Pamela remained frozen in her seat. The legal battle was over, but the personal reckoning had only begun. The next morning, the business section carried the verdict on its front page. Vance and Associates stumbles in Dunmore fraud defense. At the firm, a senior partner slammed the paper onto the table and delivered the verdict on Pamela's judgment.
This was a winnable case, Pamela. Your personal conflict blinded you.
She was removed as lead litigator on major cases, her partnership placed on probation. Younger associates whispered in the corridor, their glances a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. The firm's brass sign, polished to a gleam, now seemed to reflect only the gray rain outside. Across the city, Catherine sat in her quiet home office, the same newspaper on her desk.
I should feel triumph. Instead, I just feel tired.
She turned off the television, poured a cup of tea, and stood at the window as the morning light settled over the city. Victory had come, but Catherine had no appetite for gloating. The silence she had chosen for 7 years was still her most eloquent reply. 3 days after the verdict, Catherine sat at her desk as dusk softened the room. She pulled a sheet of cream stationery from the drawer, her movements unhurried.
I could let this go without a word, but after 7 years, silence is no longer the only tool I have.
She picked up her fountain pen. The ink flowed without hesitation, dark and permanent. She wrote, "I always enjoy professional dialogue with family."
She'll recognize the phrase. It's a mirror, not a weapon.
Beside the note, she placed a copy of her latest paper, Behavioral Anchoring in Financial Fraud Estimation. The paper was dense with equations and citations, the very language Pamela had dismissed as fake.
This is not revenge, it's evidence. Let her see what a real PhD looks like.
She sealed the envelope, a faint, tired exhale escaping her lips. There was nothing left to prove. The envelope sat on the corner of her desk, addressed to Vance and Associates, outside the window. The city lights blinked in the dusk. Pamela returned from a tense partners' meeting to find a cream envelope centered on her desk, her name written in a hand she recognized. She opened it slowly, as if already sensing the weight inside. The note was brief, the words sharp in their politeness.
I always enjoy professional dialogue with family. She used my own weapon.
Beside the note lay a printed journal. The title was precise, Behavioral Anchoring in Financial Fraud Estimation.
The very paper that dismantled my case. She sent me the evidence of her expertise.
Pamela's face drained. She looked at the journal, then at her own framed diplomas on the wall, and found them suddenly small.
She never needed to say a word. The truth was always going to speak for itself.
She sank into her chair, the weight of 7 years of disrespect pressing down like a verdict she could not appeal.
I mocked her for 7 years, and she just handed me the proof that I was wrong.
For the first time in 7 years, Pamela had nothing to say. The silence that Catherine had mastered now belonged to her. Thanksgiving arrived with the scent of roasted turkey and the clatter of dishes. The Vance family gathered, laughter filling the rooms, but an unspoken shift had settled over the dining table. Pamela sat at the end of the table, fork tracing the rim of her plate, her voice absent from the conversations around her. George caught Catherine's eye from across the room and gave a small nod toward the hallway. She followed him without a word.
You took the high road. Thank you. I know what that cost.
It cost less than staying silent another year.
George pulled her into a hug, firm, grateful, the kind of embrace they had not shared since they were children.
This is what I was protecting, not my ego, but this.
When they returned to the table, Pamela's eyes remained fixed on her plate, her silence no longer a weapon but a shield. The family chattered on about pie recipes and football, the old rhythms filling the space where tension used to live. No one mentioned Easter, no one needed to. Late evening, Catherine returned to her home office. The Thanksgiving laughter still echoed faintly in her ears.
I should be exhausted, but I'm not, just settled, for the first time in years.
She picked up the childhood photo, her thumb tracing her brother's frozen smile. She set it on the shelf beside her diploma, 2 frames aligned, 2 lives reconciled. The Princeton seal and the gap-toothed grin. Both belonged to her now. She walked to her desk and closed the laptop, the blue light withdrawing from her face. She glanced back at the 2 frames on the shelf, the room darkening around her. Her reflection in the dark window looked back, finally at rest. The world now called her Dr. Vance. It always had. The office fell quiet. The story was complete. Late at night, Pamela still sat at her desk. The journal lay open beside her, its equations blurring under the dim lamp. She opened her laptop. The screen illuminated a draft email, subject blank, the greeting, "Dear Catherine," blinking under the cursor.
What could I possibly say? I'm sorry? After 7 years, that's just another insult.
She highlighted the empty text, her finger hesitating over the delete key. The silence pressed louder than any apology she could type.
She never needed my apology. She needed to be heard, and the whole world heard her.
She pressed delete. The draft vanished. She turned off the lamp. The city lights from the window traced the tear on her cheek like a streak of silver. Some lessons don't need to be spoken. They are simply felt in the dark. The screen went black. A new silence settled over the office. The story was now truly done. The Easter table sat empty now, chairs pushed back, the silence of a long-finished meal. The courtroom had returned to emptiness, the witness stand waiting for no one. A Princeton diploma hung on the wall, its frame catching the first morning light. Beside it, a childhood photo, 2 grinning siblings, untouched by the years of pain. Catherine closed her laptop, the light leaving her face, a quiet smile settling. Pamela's desk bore the journal, still open, its equations a silent witness. A dark office window reflected a woman who had finally learned to be still. The diploma and the photograph aligned, telling a story without words. Over the final frame, the title appeared, "My SIL mocked my fake PhD at Easter." Fade to black. The last note faded into silence. Some credentials speak for themselves. Silence. 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 End of video.